A teacher's duty is to nurture, protect, and shape young minds, a sacred trust that forms the very foundation of our communities. We send our children to them, believing in their integrity and their vow to safeguard the vulnerable. But behind this hallowed promise can lie a shocking and profound betrayal, one that shatters every assumption of safety. This series pulls back the curtain on the unthinkable, exploring the cases of educators who grotesquely twisted their role, descending from mentors into predators. We will delve into the psychological depths of these individuals, examining how the very position of authority meant to guide was weaponized for unspeakable acts. The spectrum of their crimes is as vast as it is horrifying, spanning from the corrosive, forbidden obsessions seen in the case of Mary Kay Letourneau to the cold-blooded and calculated manipulations of Pamela Smart, and even to the explosive, brutal violence of Amy Bishop. Each story is a chilling reminder that the capacity for darkness does not always announce itself with a stranger's face. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, concealed behind a familiar smile, a teacher's desk, and a veil of trust, leaving shattered lives and broken communities in its wake. The first case is that of Pamela Smart, a story that begins in Derry, New Hampshire, where life once seemed ordinary. In this quiet suburban town, Pamela was a 22-year-old high school media coordinator, married to Greg Smart, a 24-year-old insurance agent. They were seen as a successful, picture-perfect young couple. But beneath the surface of this seemingly ideal marriage and promising career lay a secret obsession and a dangerous manipulation that no one in the community saw coming. But what paints this story dark is the brutal crime that would soon unfold. On the night of May 1st, 1990, Greg Smart was shot and killed in the couple's condominium. The immediate aftermath was set in motion by Pamela herself, who returned home and placed a frantic call to police, portraying a distraught wife who had discovered her husband murdered in a seemingly burglarized home. The scene was one of shock and confusion, but from the very beginning, the details did not perfectly align, creating an undercurrent of suspicion. It was a crime that would leave investigators questioning everything they thought they knew about her. The investigation began with Pamela's report, but her story of a random burglary quickly unraveled. The break in the case came from an unexpected direction. A tip led police to a group of teenagers from Winnicott High School. Under questioning, 15-year-old Billy Flynn confessed to being the triggerman. He revealed the murder was not a random act, but a planned execution, and he named his accomplices. The most shocking revelation was his motive. He was having a secret affair with Pamela Smart. She had groomed him and then manipulated him, presenting the murder of her husband as the only way they could be together. The key evidence was behavioral. Pamela's own statements were contradictory, and she had swiftly inquired about Greg's life insurance. Crucially, a friend of the boys, Cecilia Pierce, agreed to wear a wire. The recorded conversations captured Pamela instructing the teenagers to stick to their alibis, proving she was the architect of the plot, not a grieving widow. When the truth surfaced, the face behind the crime, that of a sophisticated, educated woman who orchestrated her husband's murder through her teenage student, shocked even the most seasoned detectives. In a highly publicized 1991 trial, Pamela Smart was convicted of being an accomplice to first-degree murder, conspiracy, and witness tampering. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Greg Smart's family, the verdict was a moment of long-awaited justice, a relief after the brutal betrayal. Pamela Smart, however, maintained her composure and her innocence. Her case remains a stark reminder that the most dangerous criminal is not always the one who pulls the trigger, but the one who coldly manipulates others to do it for them. The case of Carla Hughes is a story that begins in Jackson, Mississippi, in a seemingly quiet suburban neighborhood where life was defined by backyard barbecues and community ties. Carla, a 26-year-old teacher's aide, was a vibrant and ambitious young woman, known for her bright smile and competitive spirit. She worked alongside Kevin and Jada Hughes and a married couple who were expecting their first child, and to all outward appearances, they were colleagues and friends. But beneath the surface of this professional camaraderie and suburban normalcy, a clandestine and volatile affair was brewing. a secret that would soon detonate with tragic consequences, proving that the most dangerous threats can fester in the plainest of sight. But what paints this story dark is the brutal crime that would soon unfold. On the evening of November 29, 2006, Jada Hughes, 5 months pregnant, was found murdered in the family's home, stabbed multiple times in a ferocious attack. The immediate aftermath was one of profound shock and horror. The call to police came from Kevin Hughes, who reported discovering his wife's body after returning from work. The scene was one of devastating violence, a home invasion that appeared to have turned lethally wrong. Yet, from the very beginning, the pieces of the puzzle did not fit neatly together, the narrative feeling somehow off. It was a crime that would leave investigators questioning everything they thought they knew about the people closest to the victim. The investigation was launched with Kevin Hughes's tragic discovery. Initially, the focus was on the possibility of a random burglary, but detectives quickly found inconsistencies. There were no signs of forced entry, and valuables were left untouched, pointing away from a random intruder. The first major break came with a behavioral clue. Colleagues at the school where both Carla Hughes and Kevin Hughes worked revealed the two were having an intense secret affair. This gave Carla a powerful motive, removing the pregnant wife to have Kevin for herself. The digital trail then sealed the case. Police obtained text messages between Carla and Kevin that not only confirmed the affair but also revealed discussions about their future together, conversations that took place both before and, shockingly, immediately after Jada's murder. The final damning piece was a timeline revelation and a forensic clue. Security footage from a local store placed Carla Hughes purchasing a distinctive set of knives shortly before the murder. The specific knife pattern matched the wounds inflicted on Jada Hughes. When confronted with the mountain of evidence, the story of a random home invasion completely collapsed. When the truth surfaced, the face behind the crime, that of a fellow educator and trusted friend, a woman who plotted the murder of a pregnant mother to steal her life, shocked even the most seasoned detectives. In a 2007 trial that gripped the state of Mississippi, Carla Hughes was found guilty on 2 counts of capital murder for the deaths of Jada Hughes and her unborn child. She was sentenced to the mandatory penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom saw a family torn apart, with Jada's relatives expressing a somber relief that justice had been served for the 2 lives so brutally taken. The case stands as a harrowing testament to the destructive power of obsession and betrayal, a chilling reminder that the facade of normalcy can hide a calculated cruelty that preys upon the most sacred bonds of family and friendship. The case of Jacqueline Ma is a story that begins in the affluent, tech-driven community of Palo Alto, California, where success and ambition are the currency of daily life. Jacqueline, a 33-year-old high school math teacher, was a respected educator, known for her sharp intellect and dedication to her students at the prestigious Henry M. Gunn High School. To parents and colleagues, she was a picture of professional commitment, a woman who had built a life around nurturing young minds. But beneath the composed facade of a trusted mentor and community member, a dangerous and illicit obsession was taking root. A secret relationship with a 15-year-old student that would violate every boundary and shatter the trust placed in her. But what paints this story dark is the series of crimes that would soon come to light. The incidents unfolded over several months in 2015, within the very classrooms and quiet neighborhoods entrusted to her care. The acts were not of violence, but of a profound betrayal, the systematic grooming and repeated sexual abuse of a teenage boy. The immediate aftermath began not with a single emergency call, but with a slow trickle of concern from students, and a final, courageous report that reached school administrators. The discovery sent a shockwave of disbelief through a community that prides itself on safety and academic excellence, forcing everyone to confront a predator operating in plain sight. It was a crime that would leave investigators questioning everything they thought they knew about the people tasked with protecting their children. The investigation was initiated by the Palo Alto Police Department after school officials reported the disturbing allegations. The initial discovery was met with skepticism, given Jacqueline Ma's sterling reputation, but the evidence trail was methodical and damning. The first key development was digital. A forensic analysis of the victim's phone revealed thousands of text messages between him and his teacher, many of them sexually explicit and occurring late into the night. This was paired with a critical behavioral clue. Colleagues and students reported noticing the teacher's unusually close and preferential treatment of the boy, with them often being seen together alone in her classroom before and after school. The final, undeniable proof came from a timeline revelation and a physical clue. The student's phone data placed him at Ma's apartment on multiple occasions, corroborating his testimony of their encounters. This digital footprint, combined with the testimony of the victim, created an incontrovertible narrative of abuse. The shift in suspicion was stark, moving from a respected educator to a calculated offender who used her position to exploit a child. When the truth surfaced, the face behind the crime, that of an award-winning teacher in one of the nation's top school districts, shocked even the most seasoned detectives. In a 2016 plea deal, Jacqueline Ma pleaded no contest to multiple felony counts of unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor and child molestation. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail and mandated to register as a Tier 3 sex offender for life. The public and the school community reacted with a mix of outrage and profound disappointment, feeling a deep sense of betrayal by someone who had sworn to educate and protect. The case serves as a solemn and enduring warning that the violation of trust is a profound crime in itself, demonstrating that the veneer of respectability and professional success can mask a dangerous and predatory nature, leaving lasting scars on victims and a community's sense of security. The case of Carolyn Warmus is a story that begins in the upscale, well-manicured suburb of Greenburgh, New York, where wealth and status often defined one's place in the social hierarchy. Carolyn, a 25-year-old elementary school teacher, was a vivacious and glamorous figure, the privileged daughter of a wealthy insurance magnate. She moved in affluent circles and seemed to have the world at her feet, but beneath the shimmering surface of a life filled with designer clothes and expensive gifts lay a desperate and all-consuming obsession, a secret affair with a married man that would twist into a plot of cold-blooded murder, proving that even the most gilded lives can hide a deeply corrupted core. But what paints this story dark is the brutal crime that would soon unfold. On the night of January 15, 1989, Betty Jean Solomon was found murdered in her Valhalla apartment, shot 9 times in a hailstorm of bullets. The immediate aftermath was discovered by her husband, Paul Solomon, when he returned home from a tryst with his mistress, Carolyn Warmus. The scene was one of extreme and personal violence, with Betty Jean's body lying on the living room floor. While it initially presented as a possible burglary, the sheer overkill and the lack of a forced entry immediately suggested to investigators a crime of passion, a deeply personal hatred behind the trigger. It was a crime that would leave investigators questioning everything they thought they knew about the relationships within this tangled web. The investigation began with the grieving husband, Paul Solomon, but his own secret affair with Carolyn Warmus quickly became the focal point. The initial break in the case was a behavioral clue. Carolyn's obsession with Paul was volatile and well documented. She had paid for his divorce attorney and was furious when he attempted to end their relationship. The key development, however, was a forensic trail that seemed straight out of a spy novel. Police traced a .25 caliber pistol, the murder weapon, back to a purchase made by a man named Vincent Parco, a private investigator. Parco revealed that Carolyn Warmus had hired him to follow Betty Jean and had subsequently purchased a gun and a silencer from him, using a fake name. The most damning physical evidence was a green contact lens found at the crime scene near the victim's body, which perfectly matched Carolyn's prescription. Despite this, the first trial ended in a hung jury, largely due to the complex web of lies and the defense's attack on the circumstantial nature of the evidence. It was only after a second, relentless investigation that a former friend of Warmus came forward, testifying that Carolyn had confessed to her, detailing how she wore a wig and used the silencer to carry out the murder. When the truth finally surfaced, the face behind the crime, that of a wealthy, educated teacher who used her fortune to orchestrate a mistress's ultimate revenge, shocked even the most seasoned detectives. In her second trial in 1992, Carolyn Warmus was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The verdict brought a long-delayed sense of relief to the victim's family, who had endured years of legal battles. Carolyn Warmus, the so-called fatal attraction killer, remains incarcerated, her case standing as a chilling testament to the destructive power of obsession and entitlement. It serves as a grim reminder that vast wealth and social standing cannot corrupt the legal system forever, and that behind a facade of glamour and privilege can lie a calculating and ruthless heart, capable of the most intimate violence. The suburbs of Detroit often paint a picture of quiet accomplishment, manicured lawns, good schools, and comfortable lives. In this world, Nancy Seaman appeared to be the portrait of success. A 52-year-old teacher, she was known for her dedication in the classroom and her involvement in community life. To neighbors in their upscale Farmington Hills subdivision, the Seaman household seemed the picture of normalcy. Yet behind the facade of their 30-year marriage, a different story was unfolding. Financial pressures mounted, resentment festered, and what once might have been love had curdled into something far darker. The couple was negotiating a divorce, but Nancy had reached a breaking point that would shatter the suburban dream forever. What happened next unfolded not in shadows, but in the stark light of everyday life. On the morning of May 10, 2004, in the clean, organized space of the family garage, a brutal confrontation erupted. As Bob Seaman prepared for his day, Nancy attacked him with a hatchet, striking him multiple times. When that proved insufficient, she procured a knife to ensure the deed was done. The immediate aftermath was one of eerie calm. Nancy cleaned the scene, wrapped her husband's body in a tarp, and went about her day, even attending a school function that evening. It wasn't until the following day, when one of their sons grew concerned about his father's absence, that police were called. They discovered Bob's body not in some remote location, but in the back of the family SUV parked at a local Home Depot, a discovery that made the violence feel all the more intimate and shocking. The investigation began with a missing persons report that quickly turned into a murder case. The initial clues were domestic, yet damning. Police discovered a freshly cleaned section of the garage floor, and a quick test with luminol revealed the ghostly glow of blood residue, despite Nancy's meticulous cleaning. The most compelling evidence, however, was a digital footprint Nancy never knew she was leaving. In a critical mistake, she had used a supermarket loyalty card to purchase the hatchet and a stack of cleaning supplies just hours after the murder. This created an unbreakable timestamp, placing the tools of the crime in her hands at a moment when she claimed to be elsewhere. Furthermore, security footage from the store confirmed her presence. When detectives confronted her with this evidence, her story unraveled. She shifted from a grieving wife to a calculated killer who had tried to sanitize her crime with the same efficiency she managed her household. The revelation that the violence stemmed not from a random act, but from the slow-burning embers of a broken marriage, painted a chillingly relatable portrait of domestic despair. In a 2005 trial that captivated Michigan, Nancy Seaman was convicted of first-degree murder. The courtroom heard not of a monster, but of a woman who had chosen a horrific solution to a domestic crisis. She was sentenced to life in prison, a fate that left the community not with a sense of victory, but with a profound sadness for the family torn apart. The case of Nancy Seaman stands as a grim testament to the fact that sometimes the most dangerous storms don't rage from the outside, but brew silently behind the closed doors of an ordinary home, proving that the greatest horrors can be found not in the shadows, but in the places we feel safest. The world of professional cycling is one of intense passion, grueling discipline, and globe-trotting ambition. It was within this high-stakes environment that Caitlin Armstrong, a 34-year-old yoga instructor and amateur gravel racer, built her life in Austin, Texas. To outsiders, she lived a vibrant, health-focused existence, deeply enmeshed in the city's active community. Her world revolved around her longtime partner, professional cyclist Colin Strickland. Yet beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic athletic lifestyle, a corrosive jealousy was festering. An obsession with Strickland's previous romantic involvement with a rising star in the cycling world would soon erupt into a violence that stunned two nations. But what paints this story in the darkest of hues is the calculated crime that unfolded on the evening of May 11, 2022. Mariah Mo Wilson, a 25-year-old cyclist known for her dazzling talent and bright future, was in Austin for a race. She was shot multiple times and found dying in a friend's apartment. The immediate aftermath was one of chaos and confusion, with the initial call to police reporting a wounded woman. The scene presented a brutal and targeted attack, leaving investigators to initially ponder a motive in the competitive world of sports. However, the savagery of the killing suggested something far more personal, a rage that went beyond professional rivalry, pointing toward a deeply intimate and sinister trigger. The investigation into Mo Wilson's murder initially had few clear leads. The break came through a combination of digital breadcrumbs and a glaring behavioral clue. Just over an hour after the murder, a license plate reader captured an SUV, registered to Colin Strickland near the crime scene. The driver was Caitlin Armstrong. When questioned, Armstrong provided a shifting and inconsistent alibi. The key digital evidence, however, was a timeline built from her own devices. Police used her cell phone location data to place her near the murder scene at the exact time of the killing, contradicting her statements. Furthermore, just days after being interviewed by police, Armstrong fled the country, using a fake passport to travel to Europe and then to Costa Rica. This flight from justice, coupled with a surgically altered appearance, screamed of guilt. The shift in suspicion was absolute, but moving from an unknown assailant to the jilted lover whose digital footprint and panicked flight painted a devastating picture of premeditation. When the full truth surfaced, the face behind the crime, that of a fitness professional who tracked and murdered a rival in a fit of jealous rage, shocked detectives with its cold calculation. After an international manhunt and her eventual capture in Costa Rica, Caitlin Armstrong was convicted of first-degree murder in November 2023. The verdict was met with a somber relief by Mo Wilson's family and the tight-knit cycling community, who had mourned the devastating loss of a young life filled with promise. Armstrong was sentenced to 90 years in prison, a near-lifetime term that reflected the heinous nature of the crime. The case stands as a harrowing cautionary tale about the deadly potential of obsession, demonstrating how a heart corrupted by envy can weaponize ambition and shatter lives, leaving a permanent scar on the world of sport. The backdrop of this story is a seemingly ordinary elementary school in the quiet Seattle suburb of Burien, Washington. Here, Mary Kay Latourneau, a 34-year-old married mother of four, was a popular and charismatic teacher, known for her bright personality and dedication to her students. To the parents and faculty at Shorewood Elementary School, she represented trust and nurturing guidance. Her own life appeared to be a portrait of suburban stability. But within the confines of her sixth-grade classroom, a forbidden bond was forming with a 12-year-old student, a relationship that would defy all moral and legal boundaries, unraveling into a scandal that would captivate and horrify the nation. The crime that shattered this illusion of normalcy was not a single violent act, but a gradual, persistent series of transgressions. The illicit relationship with her student, Vili Fualau, began in 1996, hidden behind school projects and parental trust. The immediate discovery came in March 1997, when the boy's mother found love letters from the teacher and alerted the police. The aftermath was a slow-motion shockwave through the community, leading to Latourneau's arrest. The true, stunning consequence of the crime was revealed while she was out on bail and under a court order to have no contact with the child. She was discovered in a car with him and was visibly pregnant with his child. This brazen defiance made it clear this was not a momentary lapse, but a deep, ongoing obsession that flouted the legal system and the well-being of the child she had sworn to protect. The investigation was triggered not by a body or a weapon, but by a mother's intuition and a handful of incriminating letters. The initial evidence was entirely behavioral. Colleagues had noticed the teacher's unusually close and preferential attention paid to the boy, but it was the physical proof of the relationship, the love letters, that provided the probable cause for arrest. The most damning development, however, was a biological clue. a pregnancy test. Mary Kay Letourneau's pregnancy, confirmed while she was facing charges, provided irrefutable physical evidence of the sexual relationship. Despite pleading guilty to second-degree child rape and being sentenced to prison, the investigation had a second act. After her release from a treatment program, she was found again with the then 14-year-old boy, resulting in a second prison term. This time, digital evidence in the form of hotel receipts and phone records helped solidify the case against her for violating her parole. The shift in suspicion was absolute. She transformed in the public eye from a sympathetic figure to a repeat offender whose obsession overrode any regard for the law or the child's welfare. When the full scope of her actions became clear, the image of the pregnant teacher with her adolescent lover created a moral and legal quagmire that shocked the nation. In a legal resolution that spanned years, Mary Kay Letourneau ultimately pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree child rape. She was sentenced to over 7 years in prison. The public reaction was a complex mix of outrage, morbid fascination, and for some, a misplaced sympathy, fueled by the eventual marriage between Letourneau and Fulao after her release. Her story remains one of the most infamous examples of teacher-student abuse, a deeply troubling case that serves as a stark reminder of the profound and lasting damage that occurs when a guardian becomes a predator, and the lines between care and exploitation are catastrophically blurred. The halls of academia are meant to be sanctuaries of learning, a notion deeply held in Huntsville, Alabama, home to the University of Alabama. Here, Dr. Amy Bishop, a 44-year-old neurobiologist and assistant professor, was a figure of intellect and ambition. To her colleagues in the biology department, she was a sharp, if sometimes intense researcher fighting for tenure. The university campus, with its sprawling lawns and modern facilities, represented a world of order and intellectual pursuit. But beneath the surface of academic decorum, a storm of resentment and perceived injustice was brewing. A simmering rage over the denial of her tenure application was about to transform a faculty meeting into a killing ground, revealing a capacity for violence that lay hidden behind a doctoral degree. The breaking point arrived on a Friday afternoon, February 12, 2010, during a routine faculty meeting in the Shelby Center for Science and Technology. As her colleagues gathered around a conference table, Amy Bishop stood, produced a 9mm handgun, and began methodically shooting. The scene was one of utter terror and chaos, as esteemed academics dove for cover under tables. When the shooting stopped, 3 of her colleagues were dead and 3 more were grievously wounded. The immediate aftermath was one of panic and lockdown, with the campus plunged into fear as police scrambled to locate the shooter, who had fled the scene. It was an act of targeted violence that shattered the illusion of the university as an ivory tower, safe from the brutal conflicts of the world. The investigation began with the frantic 911 calls from within the building. Witness accounts immediately identified the shooter as their colleague, Amy Bishop. The first major development was the swift location of the suspect. Bishop was apprehended without incident in a hallway outside the meeting room, still in possession of the firearm. The key evidence was both behavioral and historical. Investigators quickly uncovered a deeply troubled past that had been largely overlooked. Most notably, they re-examined the 1986 death of her brother, Seth Bishop, in Massachusetts. Originally ruled an accident, the case was reopened, revealing that Amy had shot her brother in what was now viewed as a deliberate act. This revelation painted a portrait of a long-standing propensity for violence when confronted with familial or professional pressure. The motive for the university shooting was clear: a vendetta against colleagues she blamed for derailing her career. The shift in the investigation was not about who did it, but why, and how warning signs from her past had been missed. When the full truth of her history surfaced, the image of the professor as a cold-blooded killer who had allegedly struck before, shocked a nation that had believed her brother's death was a tragic accident for over 2 decades. Facing capital murder charges, Amy Bishop never stood trial. In 2012, she pleaded guilty to 1 count of capital murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, sparing the victims' families a protracted trial. The academic community was left to grapple with a profound sense of loss and institutional failure. The case of Amy Bishop stands as a dark testament to the fact that the most dangerous explosions are not always born of sudden impulse, but can be the result of pressures that build over a lifetime, and that a history of violence, even when shrouded in mystery, can be a terrifying prologue. The community of Tracy, California, is the kind of place where neighbors know each other and children play safely in the streets. It was here that Melissa Huckabee, a 28-year-old Sunday school teacher and mother, was known to those around her. She was the granddaughter of a local pastor and presented herself as a devout, trustworthy woman, often seen at the Orchard Estates mobile home park where she lived. To the families who knew her, she was a familiar and seemingly caring figure. But behind the facade of faith and family, a profound and disturbing darkness was festering, a secret depravity that would exploit the very trust her position was meant to uphold. The horror began to unfold on March 27, 2009, when 8-year-old Sandra Cantu, a spirited little girl who was Huckabee's daughter's friend, failed to return home. The immediate aftermath was a community-wide search, a desperate effort fueled by fear and hope. The discovery that plunged the town into mourning came 8 days later, when Sandra's body was found stuffed inside a black suitcase, submerged in an irrigation pond just north of the mobile home park. The call to police reported a suspicious piece of luggage. When it was hauled from the water and opened, it revealed a scene of unspeakable tragedy. This was not a simple disappearance. It was a brutal violation that turned a close-knit neighborhood into a place of terror and suspicion. The investigation into Sandra Cantu's murder was a massive, heart-wrenching effort. The initial break in the case came from a crucial piece of physical evidence: the suitcase itself. Investigators quickly traced the distinctive luggage back to Melissa Huckabee, who initially claimed it had been stolen from her porch. This behavioral clue, her immediate and false report of a theft, raised significant suspicion. The evidence became undeniable with forensic analysis. Sandra's DNA was found inside the suitcase, and a roll of duct tape found in Huckabee's home matched the tape used to bind the child. Most damningly, the autopsy revealed the presence of sleeping pills, and Huckabee, who had a prescription for the medication, eventually confessed to using them to sedate the young girl. The shift in the investigation was stark and shocking. The Sunday school teacher, once a part of the community's search effort, was now its primary suspect. When the full truth emerged, the face behind the crime, a woman who had abused her position of trust to lure, drug, and murder a child from her own neighborhood, horrified a nation and shattered a community's sense of safety. In 2010, Melissa Huckabee pleaded guilty to murder with the special circumstances of kidnapping and lewd acts on a child in order to avoid a potential death penalty sentence. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was filled with the raw grief of Sandra Cantu's family, for whom the guilty plea offered a measure of judicial closure but no end to their pain. The case remains a deeply unsettling chapter, a stark and sobering reminder that the most heinous evil can hide behind a mask of normalcy and faith, preying upon the innocent from within the heart of a trusting community. The quiet, tree-lined streets of the Ashland neighborhood in Oakland, California, were known for their diversity and tolerance, a place where people could live authentically. It was here that Dana Rivers, a 61-year-old transgender activist and former teacher, had built a reputation as a pioneering figure. Having been at the center of a landmark case in the 1990s that paved the way for transgender teachers, she was a celebrated and well-known personality. To her neighbors, she was a vibrant artist and a staunch advocate. But behind the walls of a modest bungalow on the night of November 11, 2016, a scene of unimaginable violence was unfolding, revealing a side of the activist that was as brutal as her public persona was progressive. But what paints this story in the darkest of hues is the savage crime that was discovered in the early hours of the following day. Neighbors, alarmed by strange noises and flashes of light, called the fire department to report a possible explosion at the home of a couple, Charlotte Reed and Benny Diambu Williams. Firefighters arrived to find a smoldering house and inside a horrific tableau. All three residents had been shot and stabbed multiple times. The bodies of Reed and Diambu Williams were found doused in chemicals and set ablaze in an attempt to destroy the evidence. The sheer overkill and the methodical effort to incinerate the scene pointed not to a random act, but to a deeply personal and vengeful fury that shocked seasoned first responders. The investigation into the triple homicide began immediately, with the gruesome scene pointing to an intensely personal motive. The first major break came from a combination of eyewitness accounts and digital evidence. A neighbor's doorbell camera had captured footage of a vehicle fleeing the scene at a high rate of speed around the time of the murders. The vehicle was traced to Dana Rivers. Even more damning was the physical evidence. A search of Rivers's home and van revealed a cache of weapons, including a .44 caliber handgun, later ballistically matched to the murders. Her clothing was stained with the victim's blood, and investigators found possessions belonging to the murdered couple in her van. The behavioral clues were equally telling. Rivers had a history of conflict with the victims, particularly Charlotte Reed, related to their shared involvement in the leather subculture, suggesting a motive rooted in personal vendetta and obsession. The shift in suspicion was stark, moving from a random, unexplained attack to a targeted assassination orchestrated by a once-respected community figure. When the full truth was assembled, the image of the celebrated activist as a cold-blooded killer who executed and attempted to burn her victims shocked a community that had revered her. In a trial that concluded in 2022, Dana Rivers was convicted on 3 counts of first-degree murder, with special circumstances for the multiple murders and use of a firearm. In 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought a somber sense of justice to the families and friends of the victims who had endured a long wait for closure. The case of Dana Rivers stands as a profoundly disturbing paradox, a chilling reminder that a legacy of advocacy and breaking barriers can be utterly eclipsed by a single night of savage violence, proving that the capacity for brutality knows no identity and can reside where it is least expected.